Welcome to the Nightcap. I am Stephanie Ruhle, and we are now just 1, 2, 3, 4 days away from the election. And Donald Trump is embracing, guess what, violent rhetoric. During an interview with Tucker Carlson yesterday, the former president launched insult after insult at Joe Biden and VP Kamala Harris, but he saved the worst and most aggressive language of all for former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney. Watch this.
She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. You know, when the guns are trained on her face. You know, they're all war hawks when they're sitting in Washington in a nice building saying, oh, gee, let's send 10,000 troops right into the mouth of the enemy. But she's a stupid person.
In a statement, Liz Cheney warned those remarks are, quote, how dictators destroy free nations. And Kamala Harris echoing that warning earlier today. Watch this.
This must be disqualifying. Anyone who wants to be president of the United States who uses that kind of violent rhetoric is clearly disqualified and unqualified to be president. Representative Cheney is a true patriot who has shown extraordinary courage in putting country above party. Trump is increasingly, however, someone who considers his political opponents the enemy, is permanently out for revenge, and is increasingly unstable and unhinged.
And here's what the vice president said just a few moments ago at a rally out in Wisconsin.
This is someone who is increasingly unstable, obsessed with revenge. He is consumed with grievance, and the man is out for unchecked power. We have an opportunity to finally turn the page on a decade of Donald Trump trying to keep us divided and afraid of each other. We are done with it. We are exhausted with it. We are turning the page.
With that, let's bring in our Nightcap MSNBC anchor who reigns from Ohio. Chris Jansing is here, NBC senior national politics reporter and Washington Commander superfan John Allen. Liz Winstead joins us, founder and chief creative officer for Abortion Access Front and the co-creator of The Daily Show, and MSNBC political analyst who we never get to see in person, Juanita Tolliver. She's also the author of the forthcoming book, A More Perfect Party. All right, let's talk about Donald Trump's closing message, okay? The Madison Square Garden debacle, the garbage truck, putting RFK Jr. in charge of health care, and now this rhetoric with Liz Cheney. What is your take on the closing message, where we are?
I mean, if you wanted to alienate women again and again, here you go. Because the calls for violence against political opponents is a pillar of fascism. But the calls for violence against women is a prevalent problem globally. This is something that women are going to hear, paired with his remarks earlier this week of whether women want it or not, coming from the mouth of someone who has been found liable of sexual assault, coming from someone who says these harmful things, uses this violent rhetoric regularly. It leaves a bad taste in the mouths of voters only 4 days out from the election. And when I hear that, of course voters are going to take this with them into the ballots when they go into the polls to vote. Of course voters are going to talk to their friends and families about this. Of course, this is something that they're going to, the Harris campaign is right to amplify. And when they amplify it, they're clear about using Trump's own words and then running the tape back again and again and again. Because when they say turning the page, this is explicitly what they want the country to move away from. Because when Vice President Harris talks about the 10 years, and how disqualifying this message is, it should absolutely be disqualifying, but it's not. Millions and millions of people are still going to be voting for Donald Trump because he operates on a plane where he is perceived to be living above the law, even though he's been found guilty of 34 criminal charges, even though he faces federal charges in multiple courts. He's still existing that way.
What is your take on the closing message?
I mean, the turning the page is, the book is The Handmaid's Tale. And so I think we know that now. I mean, is it a message or is it just this sort of rapid fire firing of grievances that don't even sound cohesive at this point? And every single piece of it was aimed at women. All of it. And then name-checking Liz Cheney as sort of the icing on the garbage cake was really a message to women and anybody who has a woman in their life that they love. Because the truth is, at this point, I was up last night. I woke up at 3 in the morning, and my thought was, I would like someone to actually consider us and actually understand and care. And when you look at people dismissing this, it sometimes feels very troubling that people don't consider our humanity.
Yet this race is in a dead heat.
As George Clinton would say, it's funking close. Yeah, it's in a dead heat, but I think what's fascinating here with Trump is that he is getting, as he gets more nervous, getting angrier. You know, like, and it's not to say that he's going to lose per se. I'm not making that prediction, but what I do think that he feels the pinch. And the reaction of him when he's feeling stressed is to lash out against everybody. The presidency is a stressful job. It is more stressful than campaigning for presidency. It's more stressful than the thought that he might lose a second time. And so you look at that and you say, how is this guy going to operate for 4 years if he's already at an 11 on a scale of 10? And just one other thing, I mean, you hear, you know, we talked about some of the things that he said. I really thought the thing he said the other night was particularly, it was like the construction that he used, where he said, I'm going to he said, I'm going to protect women whether they like it or not. And, you know, whatever you say before whether they like it or not, throw that out the window, because most of the women I know exactly what that construction sounds like.
Okay, but not just Donald Trump. Let's talk about Mike Johnson this week, right? Floating the idea that the CHIPS Act, the bipartisan bill that's had a huge positive impact, economic positive impact on states like Arizona, floated the idea, maybe we'll repeal that. He has since walked that back, just like he did the idea, oh, we're going to get rid of Obamacare. Oh, maybe not. So he's certainly not helping with the closing message.
Well, beyond that, he did it when he was in New York campaigning for one of the members of Congress on the Republican side who is most vulnerable. He lives in an area in central New York that has been given billions of dollars to build a chips factory. Even Elise Stefanik signed a letter that she was thrilled to death about this money coming into that area. So you have the guy who is essentially setting the stage for, can we continue to hold the House or not? He is out campaigning for somebody in a tough race that has gotten billions of dollars. What is the last thing you want to do is say, I'm against them, against the CHIPS Act that brought billions of dollars into your district.
It makes absolutely no sense. But, John, I want to go back to the thing that you just said, Donald Trump's words earlier this week, I'm going to protect women whether they like it or not. We're all dissecting that sentence. But chances are, whomever is still out there who is undecided or unmotivated, who these two candidates need to get off the couch and voting, what is going to be the biggest issues for them in the end? Is it abortion? Is it immigration? Is it the economy? Because all along, Donald Trump's kind of winning issues or strongest categories were immigration and the economy. And the economy has become a weaker and weaker argument for Donald Trump because while it might not be fantastic for everybody, it is absolutely not the dumpster fire that he claims it is.
So I think you asked the $64 billion, trillion dollar question, or whatever it is now with inflation. No, but I think
you're a nerd.
I'm like, come on.
But this is the problem for the campaigns. They've been working on these people all, you know, for the last year, basically trying to drive them out and figure out how am I going to get this gamer, you know, who doesn't think about politics, who doesn't talk about politics, who is like on the, you know, playing with friends on Fortnite or whatever. Like, how do I reach that person and make them? And they've done everything they can.
Donald Trump gets on board for crypto. That's exactly a cryptocurrency that he always hated. He doesn't know anything about. Suddenly, in the last 5 weeks, he's Mr. Crypto and now has his own exchange. That's how he gets them off the couch.
He's the father of crypto.
I mean, yeah, that and IVF, yes.
We're now, A lot of fathering going on in IVF. I'm not sure Trump's the father. But I do think that, like, when you're talking about these undecided voters, what's fascinating about it is the campaigns know who all these people are. They know what their magazine subscription habits are. They know what games they play. They know who the voters are, and they still can't get them out.
Yeah, to your point, Stephanie, the Harris campaign has such stronger ground games in every single state. They have
120,000 people on the ground in Arizona, according to Mark Kelly.
Tomorrow, here in New York City, they're going to fill up 8 buses and take them to places like Pennsylvania to go door knocking, door to door. These are things that they're doing that everybody who's ever run a campaign says is what you have to do. And yet, as you say, it's a deadlocked race. I'll answer your question very directly. This is completely anecdotal, but I've been talking to a lot of people, including dozens of Trump supporters online at Madison Square Garden. This, to me, again, based on those conversations, is the feeling part of the race. You know how people said for a long time, I don't care what the numbers say, I don't feel that the economy is doing well. I don't feel comfortable in my own skin. I think that there are things that can move a race that may never even show up on an exit poll. I agree with you. Again, talking to women, including Republican women, over the last 24 hours, there is something about, and again, you honed in on this, saying whether you want it or not is triggering. I've heard that word from women, triggering. The women who have been in relationships, who have been in workshops, who have had bosses who have had dads or brothers or any male in their life who always told them, I know what's best for you. That is something that may or may not resonate with some people and say,
okay,
you know what?
We're hearing that from beyond Donald Trump. Right? In the last few days, right-wing media, this whole idea, are these wives out there going to disobey their husbands, undermine them, go behind their husbands' backs?
Because it will be the ultimate betrayal, right?
Correct.
That's how they're seeing this. And that's why I think the Vice President Harris campaign's ads saying, you ain't got to tell your husband how you vote, are smart. Like, some people might scoff at that. Like, oh, what antiquated sense of marriage do you have? But the reality is that's the antiquated sense of marriage that Republican men have, some Republican men have in terms of what we've been seeing projected across right-wing media. But the reality is women know their power. And it goes to what Vice President said in response to those harmful statements from Donald Trump about whether you like it or not, when she's like, women have autonomy. Women have the ability to make their own decisions. Women have the awareness and can fully take care of ourselves. And I think that goes into her argument for why she deserves this role as the most powerful person in the world in the presidency as a woman.
And just to your point about those ads, because those ads gave me so many feelings, and not only did I feel like, oh my God, how do I feel about this commercial? And I think it's smart to talk to the women who are there. But one thing we're not talking about with those ads is, what does that relationship actually mean? That's a relationship that exists in America and that exists profoundly. And the fact that it does is also a troubling part of the system that we're talking about. Right? The fact that there are women in these marriages where they cannot have conversations about, I'm going to vote this way because these are my values, you're going to vote this way. The fact that you have to hide, and when you look at those ads, like this knowing stare, like blink twice if you need me to get you out of this marriage feeling.
Okay, but isn't there something, I don't want to say beautiful, but a real connection that she's saying, I see you, right? Because until now, right, lots of conservative women often feel like the women's movement, women's empowerment doesn't include them. It doesn't include their values. They don't see themselves in it. And the fact that in these ads, that this messaging, like, listen, I get your lifestyle, I'm not judging your lifestyle or your family, but you get to vote for whomever you want. Is there a chance that there are women out there who are saying, yes, I connect with you, and the voting booth might be the only place other than the shower that I have privacy and I can do my thing?
I can only tell you that in making a lot of phone calls to folks in Ohio for a segment that we're going to do later about our hometowns, there is someone who was in a family member's wedding, and he loves Trump, I shouldn't say that. He hates Trump, but he's going to vote for him because he said, I don't like him as a person, but I like his policies. And he believes he's going to do better under Donald Trump. His wife, who has always been very open, talking politics to people in her circle, will not tell him or any of her friends who she voted for. She does not strike me as someone who is afraid to say,
Right.
I think that there's something there. I can make my decision for myself. I don't have to tell you who I'm going to vote for. There's a little something that's roiling out there. Does it translate to the voting booth? I don't know, but it's touched a nerve. And what it does, and I've been thinking about this a lot, like this closing argument. The closing argument for Donald Trump hasn't changed from 2016 to 2020 to 2024. It's just Donald Trump on steroids, right? The more nervous he gets, not just about the fact of, I don't know if I'm going to win, but if I don't win, what that might mean for those legal things.
Right, because isn't his sentencing later in November?
Yeah.
For the New York case?
All of that plays into turning the page. And it is, so I don't think we've ever seen a candidate before take Donald Trump's own words and use it to support their own closing message.
Juanita, all of these words, we're talking about what this is doing to women, and women could win this thing. In Georgia, we learned tonight that the gender gap is even bigger in early voting. And we have this assumption that it's women, women, women. But should Kamala Harris not be counting out men, right? Not all men, John included, fall into this macho alpha male crypto bro. There are all sorts of men out there who absolutely want their wives, their daughters, their girlfriends, their sisters to have control of their own body.
But she's counted out men, though, because she's not exclusively running on abortion. Abortion is absolutely a motivating factor in this campaign. And in this election cycle, it's going to appear on the ballot in 10 states, right? But what we do know is that she has an economic plan she's put out that's going to appeal to men and women parents, whether that's the child tax credit, whether it's a down payment for a new home. Her policies aren't exclusively geared toward women. They're geared toward the American public. And I think that's something that she reiterates every single time she speaks about the voters with such respect. In that Fox interview, she was asked, wait, are you saying Donald Trump voters are stupid? She's like, I'd never say that. He'd say that, but I'd never say that. Or when she's, today, I think she did another barbershop visit with black men, sitting down, talking about her plans for community and investments in jobs and investments in local communities. That's what resonates. I think in this conversation, yes, we've been focused on women, but I think we'd be hard-pressed to say that she's been alienating men.
No, but I'm just saying the abortion argument, right? The access to abortion care doesn't have to be an argument that's just for women. I mean, this is something that you focus on.
Yeah, no, and it shouldn't be. And I think for a long time, in this process of how we've been fighting for reproductive rights, when we started it, it was like we first said to men, hey, you've controlled us long enough, butt out. But once we realized this has to be something that we talk about as a community, we never gave men a way in. Now, what I love to say to men, can I say it on the show? I'm going to try.
Yes, do it.
Is number one, we made a video a year and a half ago with Kamau Bell, and we had Kamau Bell count up how much money he'd spent on birth control, and his wife counted how much money she spent on birth control. He spent $240 on some condoms he still had in his wallet. She spent
a lot of condoms.
Yes.
Big wallet.
Big wallet.
She spent $15,000 over the course of her lifetime. And I ask a lot of women, like, in your sexual life, how many times did you negotiate who was spending the money on the birth control? I mean, I just always took it on personally, right?
Of course.
And so, the second thing I always say too, if you are in a relationship right now or a marriage, and it's not with the first person you ever had sex with, thank birth control and thank abortion care, because they probably played a role in you being able to have agency, both of you, over how your destiny was going to go. And that is not exclusive to women. That goes to men also. And bringing that up and saying, hey, just check in with yourself. You're actually with the person you want to be with, not the person that, oops, college drinking.
Okay, I'm going to let everybody, we have to take a commercial break. And during the commercial break, everyone here is going to close their eyes and think about their high school and or college, not judging your first time boyfriend or girlfriend, and think that's who you might be with today.
Yes.
All right, when we return, my God, I don't want to think about that. No.
Let me out.
It's Friday. You know, there's such a chance I could just blurt out the name. Okay, the lies and disinformation about the election dialing up. I can't even think straight. What to expect after the votes are in and later. The message voters are hearing around the country. What is at stake? John wants to erase himself right now. And how people are responding when our nightcap and the 11th hour continues. This is what happens when you come on a Friday night. Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh. It's going to be a fraud. Democrats will have cheated. That's what they will hear. What are we in for, John?
I mean, his own people tell him that. Look, the pollsters that work for him, a bunch of people, most of the people that work for him are total sycophants. Not all of them, not all the people on this campaign. It's a little bit different than the past operations, whatever. But like, for years and years and years, everybody around him's told him everything's going well. They basically told him that if he hit a certain mark in 2020, that he'd win the election. And he hit the mark, and he's like, but I didn't win the election, so it must have been fraud. I think this is, look, they're setting up to argue that he was cheated if he loses, and of course there was no fraud at all if he won, which is ridiculous. Donald Trump, as he has been for his entire life, is somebody who says, heads I win, tails you lose.
You're going to tell us that there are non-sycophants in this campaign this time around? What are their names? Because if there were, did they quit before the Madison Square Garden rally?
Yeah, they're scarce and gone. I think those are the names. No, look, I think there are people who tell him some things that are close to the truth, but they usually don't work for him for very long. So it tends to be people who are not the ones who actually work directly for him. So there are donors, there are friends of his that may try to tell him what's going on, members of Congress occasionally. But if you work for him, you can't really tell him the truth. You can't challenge him. You look at the way his campaign staff has operated in this campaign, what they basically do is let him go out and do what he's going to do and then react to it. They're not trying to manage what he's saying on a stage.
I would just say that is also the case with 98% of CEOs out there and other political leaders. It's hard to find a big business leader out there with a team telling them what they're doing wrong.
But do they tell them, don't go out and just bald-faced lie something that can be fact-checked? He went to New Mexico. You can easily Google. I give you 3 seconds to Google it. He said, we won here both times. He lost there both times. So
he also said, we're here because I'm trying to get more street cred with Latinos, and no one stopped him from saying that.
By the way, Republicans haven't won New Mexico since 2004. It's been 20 years, and he didn't come anywhere close to winning New Mexico.
So is the Harris team prepared in the event that he loses, that he is going to call foul and say it was a fix, or Tuesday night, he's just going to come out at 8 p.m. and say, oh, I got this thing, I won. Are they prepared for this?
They've got thousands of lawyers, literally. They have poll watchers as well. We hear a lot about Donald Trump's poll watchers. They have their own poll watchers, and they have experience, right? They have a serious team, and they have experience. They know what happened in 2020. And look, there's multiple levels of this. There is the actual danger to democracy. They feel very good, generally, about the changes that have been put in place in a lot of... Look, if you've ever gone to an election office, and I've spent a lot of nights at election sites, these people take their jobs very seriously.
They are patriots.
They are patriots. Yes. Now they're really patriots because they're going in spite of other kinds of danger. But so they're prepared. They're ready to go. I think what you have to just be ready for is that every election night there are delays. There are things that are going to maybe go wrong with some voting machines or whatever. I think the bigger question is going to be, what's going to happen at some of those voting places? We know that there are people who say they're ready to go and they're going to keep their eye on everything and they're going to fight. They're as ready as I think you can be. And I've talked to a lot of the elections officials. Just today, I talked to an election official from Durham, North Carolina. You know, he talks about the safety measures they had to put in place, bulletproof glass and panic buttons. There was Scott McDonald, who's the election official from Dane County, Wisconsin. He is more worried about the aftermath of the election than he is about what happens on Election Day. So you have those two things. You have the legal part of it that the Harris team is going to fight, and they're ready, they're prepared. The other part of it is just the overall fear that a lot of people are feeling about casting ballots.
Can I make a quick point about that?
Yeah.
One thing that's very different about now in 2020 is Donald Trump is not the commander-in-chief. He does not control the U.S. military. And if you go state by state in these 7 battlegrounds, you've either got Democratic governors or a Republican governor like Brian Kemp, who has actually stood up to Donald Trump before. So the ability of Donald Trump as a non-incumbent president or non-incumbent with governors who aren't matched up with him politically to try to do what he tried to do in 2020 unsuccessfully is like much more limited. I hope that there is no violence in this country over politics. The whole concept of politics is to avoid violence. The idea is to solve our differences peacefully. But I do think that the setup is fundamentally asymmetric to what it was in 2020.
And I wish that story was told more, because I think that people panic when they see what happens at the polls in North Carolina, ballot boxes on fire, and that reset of this is different. These are the governors of these states. This is the court system they will go through. You know, to give people that hope that we all know they're going to challenge. That feels obvious. But will they win the challenge? Walking through those steps of sanity is reigning in these states, I think would help people a lot with their mental health.
Okay, but then what happens? Let's say the election is over, Donald Trump doesn't win, and he immediately says this thing is stolen, right? And it casts doubt in this country for a lot of voters that it wasn't a free and fair election. We already have a huge trust problem. Trust has eroded. You know, the public, you know, they do not trust the courts. They do not trust the media. They do not trust law enforcement. They don't trust lawmakers. How do we start to rebuild that?
I think first, the undergirding reality here is we need more public education, awareness of processes. And I appreciate that NBC has been out front visiting election offices in key states, talking about why Pennsylvania results will take a little while, talking about why Arizona results will take a while. That public education is critical because that sets expectations and it allows the public to call out the lies when they come in. To be able to discern the truth is critical here. And I think that's been something that's been lacking in recent years, and let's be real, lacking with the decline in K-12 education generally in this country. But that's for a different segment. The reality is the more people know, the better they can identify what the truth is. The other reality is we need better candidates who aren't just lying through their teeth every day of the week.
Okay, I want to stay on that. Do you believe, right, there are a lot of Republicans out there who are still currently in office who do not like Donald Trump.
That's right.
But they have sort of been silenced because they know they currently exist under the party of Trump and they're biting their lip. We know lots of them. Do you think if Kamala Harris wins and Donald Trump puts up a fight and says the election was stolen, do you think, and this could finally be the moment when Republicans, sort of old school, the Republicans are talking about, stand up and say, enough is enough, he lost the election, we'll move on?
I think that's questionable because, again, having gone into Madison Square Garden, it is almost impossible to overstate how his followers feel about him. It just keeps escalating, and the way they repeat word for word the things that he says on the stump, the way they repeat the belief that everyone is out to get them, that there are lies, that the ones who are cheating are the ones on the left. It's not something that's going to happen like that, that's for sure. But I do think what we need to look at is 2020. There was lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit, and they lost again, and they lost again. I will say two quick things. Donald Trump did say this week the only way we lose is if they cheat. And Steve Bannon has suggested that he come out and essentially do his own returns. He's going to be the Steve Kornacki of the Republican Party. That he come out
fresh out of prison.
That he come out before the results are in on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, and that he say what he's being told, that he helps people to understand so that the left and the mainstream media can't lie about it.
The only other thing that makes me feel okay about Vice President Harris being in this scenario where they're anticipating Donald Trump saying he won is that she's been here before.
And so has this country.
She was there in 2020,
That's
but
right.
also back when she ran for attorney general. Her opponent in that race declared victory on election night before all the ballots had been counted. And she stood firm. She stood clear, and she communicated with the public. We have to wait till every vote is counted, and I fully expect her to do that again.
All right, everybody is staying right here. But before we go to break, I want to give a quick reality check of what Donald Trump's first term was really like, right? People are always like, oh, what it was like back then. I'm going to remind you. And this time, we're only looking at what was happening this week in 2020, the final days of that presidential race. Donald Trump was criticized for disrespecting a woman at one of his rallies, this time a Republican senator. He rushed Martha McSally on the stage to say, quick, you got 1 minute? And they don't want to hear this. Local election officials worked marathon hours to deal with the spread of misinformation, partly inspired by Trump hinting at voter fraud. Vehicles with Trump flags and signs surrounded a Biden campaign bus. Do you remember that in Texas? The campaign said that the cars tried to run them off the road. What did Donald Trump do? He laughed about it, and he defended the drivers, calling them patriots. And Donald Trump repeatedly said that the polls were showing him ahead, and that polls that matter were the only ones that were showing him winning, and all the other ones, well, they were just fake. Nothing Donald Trump is doing right now is new, and we all saw what happened last time. We just talked about it. He declared victory on election night far before the outcome was actually known. And of course, several weeks later, we all know what happened, January 6th. When we return, what voters say they're hearing from the candidates, what's at stake in the election when the nightcap and the 11th hour continue.